Hello and welcome to
Hey, we like your pod.
And we're going to tell you why. Hi, it's Dawn here, and I'm joined, as always, by my trusted partner, Matt Pickett. And tonight, with our very special guest, Jacob Westendorf. Welcome, Jacob. Yay. How are you? Hey!
It's good to be here, guys. Thanks for having me. I've been a big fan of this show for a while, and it's nice to put some faces to well, I've met Matt before, so it's nice to put a face to your name, Dawn.
It's so nice to meet you. I feel like I know you already.
I don't know if that's good or bad yet, so I guess I guess we'll find out.
That's sort of the whole thing about like listening to podcasts enough, and you hear the person's voice enough, it starts to feel like you know them. And that I think that thinking back on the first time that I was a guest on a podcast was with the Wednesday Pack a Day, and it was so easy to do that because I was like, oh, I feel like I know you guys already. I'm just like joining the conversation here. So I know what you mean, Dawn. Absolutely.
So how you doing this week, Jacob? It's been kind of a humdrum week in the Packers world. But what's going on in your world?
Well, they made a quarterback change. I don't know if you guys heard that or not, but it's been, I know. A wild week. Matt said it before the show, end of an era. And it's interesting how, even coming into the year, like this past year, I mentioned I didn't think the Packers were Super Bowl contenders, but when I did my preseason prediction, I still picked them to win 11 games. And everyone's like, well, you don't think they're that good, but you think they're going to win 11 games. I was like, well, Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur, like they'll figure enough stuff out just because of those two guys.
Right.
And now it's like, next year, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be able to tell the future here, but 3-14 is on the table. Like if Jordan Love stinks, that is absolutely a possible scenario. Whereas, with Rodgers and Favre even preceding him, it was, I think Bill Huber said it best. For the last 30 years, we felt really good as Packer fans to wake up on Sunday and know they had a chance to win the game. And you had to feel really, barring, some Brett Hundley starts, a Deshaun Kaiser throw in here or there, maybe not as much. But if those two guys were starting, we always felt like we had a chance. And now it's a little exciting because it is so new and so unknown, but it is an unknown. And that could be scary because, I live in Bear country and they've never had a quarterback. So they don't know what it's like to have a good one. And I don't know what it's like to not have a good one. So I'm very fortunate that way.
It's like Aaron Rodgers said on Twitter yesterday, like, thank you for making it so easy to be a Packers fan in Bear Country. Just because, when you're wearing your Packers gear around Chicago, they can't say anything to you, or they couldn't. And so now we're opening the era where maybe you could get trash talked by Bears fans, that actually could happen now. But Jacob, you mentioned 3-14 like is on the table, and I agree for sure. But without looking over the schedule, going game by game, like what do you think is kind of the upper limit of how we could do this coming season?
Oh yeah, that's the wide range, right? Here's the thing I like about what they're doing is, I know some people when they said they wanted to transition to Love is the phrasing was rip the Band-Aid off or just go full scale rebuild and cut these guys and do this and do that. And I'm just like, you can't do that because I think you got to give your young quarterback a chance to succeed. And really, like, that's the other thing we talked about is this could be, I don't think this is likely, but this could be a 1-year audition for Jordan Love. So if you give Jordan Love a 1-year audition and say, okay, we're not bringing back Robert Tonyan, Mercedes Lewis. We're not bringing back Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard. We're not bringing back David Bakhtiari, and we're going to cut Preston Smith, and we're going to cut this other guy and just kind of tear down this roster to its core. Now you're asking for him to fail. And I don't think that's – and granted, a lot of teams, part of the reason they wanted to have the foresight to pick Jordan Love was so they could insert him into a roster that was not in a position where like Trevor Lawrence's Jacksonville Jaguars were 2 years ago. They want to have that. I think that's where the wide range comes in. This Packers roster is good and good enough to the point where I know who that is. So that's funny. Thank you. I think that, they've got enough pieces, and they'll add some stuff too here, right? Like we'll see what they get in a trade for Rodgers. They're going to add a veteran receiver. They're going to add some stuff at tight end. They'll have some draft capital to play with. They've still got Jones and Dillon obviously behind him. So this roster is good enough to where, I said 3-14 is on the table. So is 12-5. If Jordan Love is really good and they get a bounce here or there and do those things, I would be very, very surprised if they were legitimate Super Bowl contenders. And I say that meaning like, like in 2019, the Packers were 13-3 and they were really good, but we all knew, listen, if we play San Francisco, we are going to get stomped. And that's exactly what happened. I think we all knew that in our heart of hearts. It just didn't work that way. The one thing I guess playing in their favor this year is there is no 2019 San Francisco 49ers. The Niners roster is really good, but I don't know who's playing quarterback for them. The Eagles were the Super Bowl participant last year. They've lost 3 or 4 starters, if not more, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's still not signed, so they're going to have some turnover. So that could play in Green Bay's favor. It's a wide range of outcomes, which is kind of fun. I think eventually, it's March 16th. So, if between now and September, I'll settle in the middle and say, anywhere between 6 and 8 wins. I think that would be 1, reasonable, and 2, I would call that acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would put it at about somewhere in the middle, like 8 or 9 wins. And I'd be really, really happy with that. Just absolutely thrilled, because it has felt like we can't grow as a team with just how, the pay was being divvied out. Like we can't do much with all the money that had to go to Rodgers. We can't build, we can't move forward as we see all these like younger teams doing stuff, making exciting moves. Now's the time we can finally start doing that. I mean, I realize we have like the $40.3 million of dead cap to get past first, but still, like to see this chance to move on, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and it's 1 year of that medicine now instead of 2 or 3. And realistically, $40 million, sure, but it's really only 9 because it was $31 million if Rodgers was on the team. Now it's a full 40 because he's not doing anything for you in that process, but it's really only an extra $9 million. So that part is kind of nice as you get to cap compliance. And frankly, Brian Gutekunst has shown a willingness to spend that money when it's available. That's the difference between rest of soul, Ted Thompson, but like Ted didn't do that. And Gutekunst, Ted Thompson would have fainted if he was the general manager and they told him that they signed Za'Darius and Preston and all those dudes on the same day like they did. So that's the nice part. And the hope for the future that you have is, once they get back to a little bit better money situation and they're not wringing money out of every contract every year, that they'll be able to, buy a more attractive free agent instead of being like, oh, Sammy Watkins.
Yeah.
Cool. Like, how do I get excited for that? I don't know. I'm trying.
You said it funny on Gold Zone last night. Something like the current, front office doesn't feel the need to win the salary cap Olympics. I think is how you put it. Something like that. It's like, yeah, exactly. Like we're actually going to be creative, move the money out, do things that we can to build a good roster. Don, I feel like we're both talking a lot here. Do you have anything you want to throw in here?
I have so much to say. A lot of questions though, but I can echo that. I am so ready to move on. And I'm also, really happy that Bakhtiari's been re-signed, right? And there are going to be people around Jordan Love to help set him up for success for his first year, at least security, let's just say security. I'm not of the mindset that he has to, perform super great the first year either. I mean, he is a rookie, this is his first year. So if he does great, I really don't expect him to flop. I mean, from what we've seen so far, but we've seen so little, and he's had such a little opportunity to be on the big stage. I mean, I can't even imagine the kind of pressure he feels right now, or he will feel when comes time to take the field. I was at Aaron Rodgers' first game as the starting quarterback for the Packers, believe it or not, and so I'm like, oh. Well, maybe I could make it to the first game this year, this season, because Matt and I were talking about maybe meeting for a game and stuff. So I'm thinking about that. I'm excited.
Definitely meeting for a game, Don. It's going to happen.
As long as my health cooperates. But I would love to see my family too. So it's like a 2-in-1 for me. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. I feel, kind of, it's not over till it's over, but I do feel like enough has been said now by Rodgers. Like, I'm really proud of the way the team has handled this. In the media and out of the media, intentionally, maybe not intentionally. I think all of it's intentional, but that they're going to get as much as they can for Rodgers, because as much as everyone wants to say Rodgers gave us so much and the Packers invested a lot in him as well. So there's nothing wrong with them getting what they can for the trade. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing dirty or nasty about that. No matter what anybody tells you, it's just the way.
Business.
It's business, man. And so I'm pretty proud of the way the organization has handled that. And kind of looking at it that way. And I want to see Love have the support that he needs to make a go of it. And I don't remember, I didn't know enough about football back in, I didn't have the bug like I do now in 2008 to recall who Rodgers had around him, but I think it was kind of a similar situation. It wasn't bare bones. He had a team around him that could support him, right? Set him up for
Jennings, Driver. They drafted Jordy that year. When they were 6-10, and granted, I was 16 years old when that happened, but that was legitimately disappointing because that team the year prior played for the NFC Championship, and they kept most of those guys for the next year. It was just they were ravaged by injuries, number one. And number two, it was, Gutekunst has talked about this before, where starting quarterbacks, when you start, you have to learn how to win. And I think that's something that, from week 1 to week 18 next year with Jordan Love, that's kind of what I want to see is, are there going to be games that he loses that you sit back and be like, man, if we had 12, we would have won that game? Absolutely. I'm almost certain that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But what you want to see between, September 10th, whenever the season starts, and the end of the season is, does he learn from them? Does he not make the same mistake twice? Does he learn from the issue at hand? And we'll see. Don, I think you said it best. We've seen almost nothing. One start, some mop-up duty, and a second half, 10 snaps against the Eagles in November? That's it.
Yeah.
10 amazing snaps.
Yeah, very nice snaps. So, and then I just feel like the last couple of years, I was so ready to move on. I just feel like it was kind of what was the point of the last couple of years? Just bringing them back to do what? And, not even win the first playoff game, at Lambeau Field. Like, it was just so disappointing. So in that sense, I'm ready to just try something new. Not completely new, and by the way, let's say hey to our guests. Hey, so for those of you who are watching on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast on Saturday, hi. But for those of you with us right now live on YouTube, hi. Hi, Brandy. Hi, Bankshaft. And to the others watching, hi. I can see you, but I can't see you. And Brandy has some questions for us. So for our illustrious guest. So
that's one adjective to use, I guess.
First of all, I liked how she described the draft compensations as a sword fight.
I like that too.
I love it. And she said she's hurt by Watkins, Cobb, and Lazard and Tanyan being gone. I'm particularly Tanyan and Lazard. I would,
Tanyan for me when I saw that today, especially one of the Bears.
I know. But he's from Illinois, so it kind of...
Yeah, he went to school like 40 minutes from where I live. So that was interesting for me to learn. But yeah, I don't live close to Chicago either, though. So, but everybody that's from around here says, oh, I'm from Chicago, but they're not.
Right.
Yeah, you guys are familiar with the band Cheap Trick, for example?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So Rick Nielsen is from Rockford, Illinois, which is where I live. I think that but they had an album once upon a time that they named Chicago, and that's where they always said they were from, and that was a big deal. Or I don't know. That was when my dad is the one who told me those stories. I wasn't around for that stuff.
That's my era.
I do like that era of music. I just don't know the context necessarily that surrounds it. So I don't
remember that part, honestly.
I've watched, whatever, as far as like breaking the bands of like Metallica. I listen to a lot of them. I listen to a lot of Motley Crue. So I know like their stories, but yeah, Cheap Trick I know a few songs and that's about it.
You got to go 10 years back before that stuff that you're talking about.
Okay. So like,
Trick,
yeah,
so.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, I'm from really far southeastern Wisconsin, so I'm practically from Chicago. I mean, Chicago suburb, Racine.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like a 45-minute drive to downtown Chicago. So
yeah,
you just pop over the border, whatever that is, 15 or 20 minutes.
Yep. It's not too far from where I live. Brandon Snide, if you guys are familiar with him, he lives in Racine.
Oh, really? I met somebody else. Oh, in Mount Pleasant. Who was from? I can't remember now, but I was like, that's part of Racine. So cool. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Brandy says, I think people want the next Rodgers compared to the first Love. It will be interesting. And Bank Chef said, you can call me Chow.
And Iowa Joe's here. Hey,
that's my guy. I
love Iowa Joe.
Nice. I have Joe. If you want me to say something nice, I have all the love in the world for Cade McNamara. So that's number one. And number two, Kinnick Stadium's awesome. And that little like wave thing you guys do to the what is it? Children's Cancer Hospital or something like that. That they do at Iowa football games after the end of first. Joe, sorry, man, I don't know the tradition, but that's pretty cool too. So yeah, I got some love for the Hawkeyes.
That sounds good. And the other thing, my last thought is just, I'm really looking forward to finally seeing Matt LaFleur coach. And I don't mean that to be snarky, but I really am, because I think honestly, and it is snarky too, but I think honestly, this is going to make and break Matt LaFleur as well. Make or break, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think he's on unsteady ground in any way.
Not yet.
Right.
Hopefully not at all. But to finally see the LaFleur offense without somebody who wants to do what they want with it and check down and whatever else, call audibles and let's see the actual vaunted Matt LaFleur offense, see what it actually looks like. I'm excited about that. I think more than almost anything else for the season, actually.
Yeah. And Brandy asked, what do you make of the way the Packers are reserved in their press interactions? Do you mean right now or in general?
I bet she means in general.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll wait for an answer on that before I answer everything. Yeah, end of the first quarter. Okay, so yeah, that is cool, Joe.
Very cool, Iowa Joe. I like that. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I mean, I've been trying to avoid the whole drama and staying off Twitter, but it's everybody's talking about it even when you're not on Twitter. And I just want us to see it resolved. But I didn't see the point for the last couple of years, really, even though Aaron Rodgers is a great player and was MVP for 2 of the last 3 years, right? We didn't win playoff games. How many times do I have to say that? So, so that's what's important to me. And I hope he's successful. And maybe he doesn't know that he needs a change, but I never really thought he would leave for another team. I thought he would retire a Packer.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little surprised. So, yeah, but I'm okay with it. I hope he's really happy and successful. And Brandy is asking her question, what do you make of the way the Packers are reserved in their press interactions, generally speaking, but also with Rodgers?
I don't think it does Green Bay any good to come out and just be like, oh, no, he's lying, or, well, that's not how that happened, or just I mean, we live in especially this day and age. That makes me sound super old when I
know.
Once you got kids, man, it's all downhill. So
the general slant is going to be towards the player. Rodgers likes to control narratives. I think that's part of why he does his interviews with Pat McAfee and AJ Hawk instead of actual professionals. Right. I don't mean that as a slight. That's just how it is. So I don't think it benefits the Packers at all. And sometimes I wish the team president could learn this, but sometimes less is more when you open your mouth. So,
and even with that, you got to wonder, was that intentional? Like sometimes
that's what I want to know.
It was, yes. Yes. Mark Murphy I don't think he intentionally went out there and said like, Oh, I'm going to totally say in this interview that's not going to work. I just think he gets in front of a microphone and can't help himself.
He can't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, side note here about Iowa Joe, by the way, he mentioned there in the chat that he's getting ready, getting ready to record with Jimmy tonight, and saw that we were on. So appreciate you, Joe. And I'm imagining what he means is maybe Jimmy's going to be a guest on the podcast that Joe does with Nick Gregory. That's the Outback Packers podcast, I believe.
Pod. Yep,
that's a good one, folks. If you haven't checked that out, I'd recommend it.
Nice.
So, yeah, I'm guessing that's probably what he's talking about. So, and of course, we love Jimmy Christensen. I think even Jacob, if pressed, would confirm that. So, maybe.
Oh man, listen, you don't need to press me on that, Jimmy. I met Jimmy probably. Let me think. Game On Wisconsin will be 3 years old in July. So before that, he just sent me a direct message asking for input on an article he wrote. And yeah, Jimmy he's an interesting fella, for sure. But yeah, him and his wife both salty the earth people. His kids are adorable.
Yes.
His daughter and my daughter share a birthday, so that is kind of cool.
Aww.
Just a year apart. So his daughter's a year older than mine. And then they should be expecting. I think they're expecting another child that should be due here relatively shortly. So
you're right.
Jimmy's got a little herd of children, but no, Jimmy's self-made. So I give a lot of credit to people that do stuff like that. Is, his whole deal with being associated with Jamal Williams and everything like that happened solely because of him. He's one of the hardest working people I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jimmy, turn that part off. I never said that. But.
I'll add too, since we're saying nice things about him. Super nice, extremely smart. I think he doesn't give himself enough credit, in fact, for how smart he is and how good his sports takes are. And just the nicest guy, huge fan of that dude. But you mentioned Game On Wisconsin. Actually, I wonder if we could talk about that for a minute. So for those who are listening or watching who don't know, Jacob is the guy who founded Game On Wisconsin. And I've always been curious, like, how did that come to be? And of course, at this point, you've handed the reins over to a couple of yahoos. So if you can talk about like what happened with that, I just want to hear all about it, actually.
Yeah. So as far as handing the reins over, I went into this mountain, and there was a really dark room that I sat in for 5 days. And then no. Okay. I'll get to that in a minute, but no darkness retreats for me. So yeah, as far as the founding goes, it was after the 2019 season. I got a phone call from a guy named Joe Arrigo. You can follow him. He's at Joe Arrigo FSM on Twitter. He works with and one of the founders of Franchise Sports Media. And it was supposed to work that way. It was going to be the Wisconsin branch of Franchise. They cover everything in Vegas and California area. So the Lakers, Raiders, things like UNLV football is a big thing that they do. Actually, the one thing they're kind of doing with their niche now is the XFL with the Vegas Vipers. So shout out Brett Hundley and Geronimo Allison. I think those are the two former Packers on that team. So, and he was like, "Hey, I've watched some of your stuff, and and my beginning. This was not my beginning. That happened 10 years ago now-ish, which we can talk about that later. But since you asked about Game On, we'll do that." Joe was like, "I've seen your stuff with Jason and Paul Brettel. And we like it. We want to add that all together." So it was me, Joe Arrigo, Jeremy Vanderlinden, Paul Brettel, and Jason Perrone. We all kind of sat together and put this together. And thankfully, I know a lot of great people and was able to put together a really good team. Met some really great people in the process as well. Todd Varney is a great example of that. Became better friends with other people: Dan Kotnick, Jimmy Christensen, Monty Moore, Aaron Alice. I had a group of Maggie Loney. I got a long list of people that were on the kind of the original group of people. But the idea was a one-stop shop of everything that you could possibly be interested in from a football standpoint. And here it all is. So do you like gambling and fantasy football? We got that. Do you like just straight football? We like that. Do you like the draft year round? We got that too. Brennan Rupp, one of my favorite things that's happened through this website was and I have nothing to do with this. This is just Brennan being awesome. But the Unpacking Future Packers thing that you guys might see on the Packers Wire, his first installment of that was written at Game On Wisconsin. And I don't want to say that's how Zach found him or anything like that, because again, I don't want to take any credit for what Brennan did. But watching him kind of grow into that. Ben Ranieri is another guy. He started his own Substack and did some stuff with the Seattle Mariners albeit a different sport, off of some stuff like that they were able to. So, the more questions you guys ask, you'll learn my background and everything like that. I kind of like cultivating those relationships and watching people grow and helping them as much as I can. I mean, I'm certainly a nobody when it comes down to everything at the end of the day, and I'm perfectly content with that. But so yeah, it just kind of started with that group, and it was me and Jason's a brother of mine. He stood up in my wedding. I've known him for probably 10 years now. I met him when I was in college. So yeah, that sounds about right. Good friends with Paul. He's got 2 kids about the same age as my 2 as well. So we've been able to kind of bond over some stuff like that. And then Jeremy, we became friends that way. And I just kind of learned some of the side of what it took to kind of run the website, put the team together, put together a programming calendar, and away we went. The rest, as they say, is history. As far as handing the reins over, since you asked, I joked about the darkness retreat. That is obviously in jest. Last January, a lot of things changed for me. I found out my wife was pregnant with our son, which has been very cool. He's 6 months old on Monday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So my little guy is 6 months old on Monday. My daughter is 3. 6 days prior to that, my father passed away. And it was just kind of a awakening. I don't know what the right word on that is, because I don't want to sound like
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, like Aaron Rodgers. It was just kind of
a good word. That's a good word for it, though. Definitely.
It was a redesigning of priorities. Really is what happened off of that. And as I went through everything, I'm not kidding when I tell you guys this. Like the first weekend of the season this year, I sat down and watched football, but it felt completely different than how it's ever felt. Now, eventually, and I'm grateful for this, the joy of that game, football in general, came back as the season went on. But I am a NFL fan because of being raised that way. My dad was a diehard Eagles fan when I was a kid. I was not, obviously. I'm a Packers fan now, but I root for the Eagles as well. I don't shy away from that. But that was a big deal, and it was difficult to kind of go through everything. So, once we got to the end of the season, what it really was for me is, there are so many people there, so many great people, Sanjay, Fred, and Matt with the freezer, Brendan Dworzinski and Matt Freilich with the final dump. You've got the crew from Lombardi's Bar, who you guys know really well, the crew from Open Book, Jen Mackey and Eli and Zach Jacobson. And there's just so many people. And for me, I like creating content. I like doing stuff like this. I like having conversations with people, but some of the background stuff and helping the website, I guess it's not really a website anymore because the website's broken, which is WordPress sucks, guys. WordPress sucks.
I was going to ask about that because I went to the website today. I was like, what's going on here?
It's broken. And I don't know, they basically won't help me fix it is what it's going down to. So we're just kind of like letting it die, for lack of better terms. But at the end of the year, I was just kind of like, there's so many things that you guys want and are able to do in order to grow. And not that I'm less passionate about it, but I just don't have the capacity to do that. I think there's a wisdom and a knowledge in knowing when it's time to do the things you're good at. Something you guys mentioned about Jimmy Christensen earlier, something I appreciate about him. And it's hard to do this in a Twitter sphere where everybody thinks you have to be an expert on everything. Right. Is knowing like, hey, here are the things I don't know. I'm not good at those things. I'm very open on, my belief is the salary cap cannot be understood. And maybe that's wrong, but like, that is my personal belief. I just think there's too many things that can happen that unless you're in it and doing it every day, 24/7, 365, that you're not going to be able to fully understand it and give 100% accurate information. So I don't talk a whole lot about it. I just say, here's what this guy says. Here's what that guy says. Here's what that guy says. I think learning what you're good at and doing those things, I think there's a knowledge in that and a wisdom in that because it makes you the best version of yourself. So with that in mind, it was to a point where it was like, hey, I'm perfectly content if this thing just is what it is. It's a cool little spot that people like to come and hang out and everything like that. And those guys, to their credit, want it to be more. And I don't fault them for that at all. I just said we've reached a ceiling. for what I'm able to provide, in addition to everything else I just mentioned. My wife is also in nursing school, so her schedule,
Yeah.
so like sometimes I go to work until 5 o'clock and then I'm home with the kids by myself until 10 o'clock because she is doing her thing throughout the course of it. So it's just not, I don't have the capacity. I don't have the ability. I don't have a bunch of stuff like that. So I felt it was best to go that direction, still be involved. I've got this logo tattooed on my chest, guys. Like and that's a real thing. Like, I still love doing podcasts. I still love talking Packers. I still love writing. I still love all that stuff, but that's all I want to do. And that's really what it boils down to. And one thing I think that I would like to think I did a good job of over the last 3 years is I never wanted to be seen as the face of Game On Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
I was very much this is the team, this is them, and look at their stuff and do their things. And then, yeah, I'm here too, but I don't get to those spots without that group. And that group, I mean, it ended up being, I think, about 60 people have either come and gone or stuck around for a while. And I'm happy to say I've maintained a relationship to some degree, at least with all of them. And that's more important to me than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
I just so admire I gotta tell you, man, the wisdom and courage that it takes to know when it's time to step down and like hand it off to somebody else, because when we as people create an entity, we become the stewards of it, and to see that entity continue to grow and develop and, not crumble, not come crashing to the ground. It has to be an egoless pursuit, like this is an entity. I want to foster it, but I can't do everything for it. And so knowing when it's time to give it to other people who have other ideas for it, not everyone can do that.
No, and I told Todd Varney in our conversation that we had together is, my hope for this is that I become, not all the way down here, but I become the Walter White to the company that he sold his stake in the show Breaking Bad. I'm not going to become a crystal meth cooker and deal. But what I meant by that was he sold his share in that company for like $5,000, and then it became a multi-million-dollar company. Like I said, in a perfect world, I hope that happens. Like, I really hope that that's what those guys are able to do. And, money, fame, all that stuff, those things just aren't that important to me. There's always more money. There's always more attention that you can get, but there's way, way, way more important things than that. So I hope that is what happens. I'm excited to still be around. I do the Gold Zone every Wednesday. I'm cooking some stuff up to stick with the Breaking Bad theme for the season. So I'm working on some of that stuff. I don't have an announcement on anything like that yet. I got to clear it with the new bosses. So so that's part of it.
Cooking up something green and gold, not something blue. So
oh, hell no. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of cooking stuff up, so when you're home with the kids those evenings when your wife is in school, do you cook? Do you actually prepare food for them?
My daughter's 3, and my son is 6 months old. So cooking for him is easy. It's baby formula. So that's pretty simple. But he is starting to eat like baby foods. So I do feed him
Little
that.
jars. Yeah.
Yeah, some stuff like that. For my daughter, she's picky. So I'm working on some of that stuff. But yeah, I can. It's a limited scope. I don't cook anything overly complicated, admittedly.
Sure.
Some of that is because I don't eat anything overly complicated. I'm very straightforward, kind of plain when it comes to stuff, which drives my wife insane. But like a chicken with a dash of seasoning or something like that, I'm cool with that. Taco seasoning over hamburger meat, I'm cool with that. But yeah, my thing with my daughter is always try and make her try something. And if she doesn't like it, then we have some things that I know she'll eat on the given time. So yeah, I do. Sometimes it also turns into DoorDash has made things very easy on all of us. And also sometimes we'll do it to where my wife is home on like Mondays, for example. So we'll cook enough for today and tomorrow. And that kind of helps on some stuff too. Cause my job is also, I don't want to say it's 24/7, but like I work in healthcare, so they can call me whenever they want.
Yeah,
making a meal that can like last several nights, that's huge, especially when you have kids. Totally.
the reason I asked, I never had children. And it's like, I'm thinking, how do you like cook and have 2 kids like that age?
Yeah, so
Time.
you have to like coach yourself to understand. This is what I have. Maybe I'm the worst parent in the world. You guys can make that decision for yourself. But I had a nurse tell me once she had 8 children, and I was like, "What?" Like, she has a baseball team in her house, for goodness sake. But she told me once, it is okay for them to cry. It is okay if they cry. Like, you don't have to pick them up the second they do.
Yeah.
So it's okay. And thankfully, my daughter's pretty good about when I tell her to sit down or you need to relax for a minute, she does. And my son he can scoot a little, but he can't really crawl. He's getting there, but he can't really crawl just yet. So basically, if I set him there, he's going to be there. So like I said, I'm not preparing something that takes me an hour and a half. So the cook prep time and all that stuff that's taken out. So a lot of times I need 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But sometimes it doesn't work. Like the other night, I burnt I was making hamburger patties and I went out to grab something for my son and I came back and I flipped it over and that side of the hamburger was burnt. So I was like, great.
I mean, I do that and I don't have any kids like all the time. That's why it's like, that seems like an awful lot. And I know that you're not I can't handle kids crying. I'm too,
it was a hard thing for me to learn. I don't think that's uncommon. It was a hard thing for me to learn that it's okay for them to experience it. Because most of the time, especially like when at my son's age, that's just how they communicate. So it's not really that they're crying. They're just saying, "Hey, I'm not comfortable. Can you move me?" Or just whatever it is.
Yeah, or something. Yeah.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of that. That's a lot of what parenting is. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. Iowa Joe says, I was talking to a guy at work yesterday and she said he had 9 kids and 1 on the way.
Wow.
And Brandy, she has 5 children,
How about
3 teenagers. Wow.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. Right.
I have a cat, and when she meows, it's like, oh, you sound like a baby crying. What? Or if I'm in the store or, out and about and I hear her crying, I freak out. I'm just it's too much. That's why I don't have kids. It's a bit too much.
There's wisdom in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So I was going to ask here. So you had said that you kind of got your start like creating content about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I had a guy who I wasn't in high school 10 years ago, but this is how it kind of started. When I was a freshman, I had this, I still kind of do, but it's not like it used to be. I had this knack for being able to remember like 2007, I think was the Bears and the Colts played in the Super Bowl. So it would have been Super Bowl 41. At that time, I was a freshman in high school. I could have named all 41 Super Bowl champions to date. I was like a walking sports encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm.
Still to some degree am, but not to the level of the way that it used to be. And not to like Chris Russo in the sports radio industry, he can be like, oh yeah, 1954, they had this game on March 30th. And just like, I can't do that anymore. Yeah. I used to be able to, but I can't anymore. So I had a guy, his name was Sam Zuba, and he was a senior. And I went to a school where it was K through 12. So we kind of learned, we kind of knew each other. We all kind of grew up together kind of thing. So I knew who he was, but he was a senior. I was a freshman. I did not expect him to ever like talk to me. Well, then he started calling me Stat Report. And whenever I was like, I don't know where that came from, but then like a whole group of seniors started calling me that. So I had like my little book and I would write like little breakdowns of, the Super Bowl, the NBA playoffs, whatever it was that was going on at that given time. But fast forward, eventually, I went to school at UW Green Bay, go Phoenix, and I succeeded. I got my journalism degree. And in 2012, I met Marcus Eversole, who works for 107.5 The Fan, and we started doing some stuff together. And then he got me hooked up with OG, Jersey Al, from PackersTalk.com. So I started writing articles for them. And then it kind of progressed into that to, let me think, where else? Today's Pigskin, which is defunct. That's not around anymore. FanRag Sports, also defunct, not around anymore. I did some stuff for Fansided. I wrote a few articles for Packernet, and then mainly became a podcaster with my first ever podcast was with Ross Uglum and Ryan Hillsland. It was called From the Benches. It was on PackersTalk.com. And that ran for a couple of years and then restarted, I guess, Pulse of the Pack with Jason Perrone and ran that. That's how Jason and I became really good friends. And it's amazing to me to watch like how all this technology is unfolded, because this used to be how we did our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just talking on the phone for an hour. I just go sit in the back room of my parents' house, and there was no studio like the setup I have now. My parents could yell and clap and throw stuff, or just like they did not care, or just whatever on stuff like that. So or they weren't cognizant. I shouldn't say they didn't care, but yeah, so I did that with Jason for a while, and then eventually it all spilled into this. And I've done a lot of different stuff. And then the other thing is I interned in 24. So the off season after the Packers lost to the 49ers. Which time? In the frigid frozen game with Colin Kaepernick as the 49ers quarterback. So Kaepernick, Harbaugh, that era of 49er team. That offseason, I interned with Bill Huber at Packer Report. I still have the magazine actually sitting right over there that I wrote the feature story for, which is kind of cool. He gave me that opportunity. Bill is, I wouldn't call him friends or anything like that with me, but he's been very good to me for this 10 years or so. He let me write a story for the site that I just pitched to him off of a whim and said, "What do you think about this?" And he let me do it. So I thought that was cool. He taught me that, if you don't have listeners, then you're just kind of writing in a diary. If you don't have readers, you're just writing in a diary. So just remember that as you're writing, as you're speaking, that those people matter to you more than, nobody's there really for you. They're there for like that stuff. And without them, there's not much there. So I learned that from him. And then that draft, it was kind of cool to watch Devontae's vault into stardom, because that was the draft I got to cover. So I met Clinton Dix, Devontae Adams. I got to interview those guys after they were picked. I still remember I asked Clinton Dix, and I even got whoa, that was a really good question. We had found out after they picked him that they were giving him the number 21. And I knew that the Packers, they only give out numbers like that. Like they don't have every number retired, but there's certain numbers. They got to think something of you to give it to you. And 21 was one of those numbers. That was Charles Woodson's number.
Yep.
And I asked him, what does that mean? That clearly they think something of you. They're giving you Charles Woodson's number. And that draft weekend was awesome. I met Tyler Dunn. Tyler is one of my good friends. He's far and away one of the best people. I know he's not the most popular person in Packers circles, because he's not the most the stories he's written about Aaron Rodgers don't necessarily put Rodgers in a positive light. That doesn't make them inaccurate. I will throw that much out there, but
I'm a big fan of Tyler Dunn.
Yeah,
I love
Big fan.
I will say with Ty, when you're the intern, and I'm not gonna go airing of grievances, but there are members on the beat that are not nice to you because you are the intern and you are the threat to their job. And I had enough of those guys.
Sure.
Jason or Tyler Dunn and Paul Imig, those were the two guys that were the nicest, and Bill obviously were the nicest to me. And I tell those guys all the time, that may not have meant anything to you in the moment, but I can tell you as a 21-year-old kid that was terrified of being in that room with all these people and talking to Mike McCarthy and Ted Thompson and just Brian Gutekunst. We interviewed Brian Gutekunst about Carl Bradford, of all people, their 4th-round pick. And it was interesting talking to Gutekunst, because once they hired him as the general manager several years later, I remembered I think it was Bill told me, this guy is going to be a general manager one day. And Goody talked a little bit that day, but it doesn't cost you anything to be nice to somebody. And sometimes that's all it takes to build a little bit of confidence in that person, that maybe they can do something. Now, me, I never made a career out of this, and I am perfectly content with that. But like I said, I still remember that. I still remember, and I still talk to both of those guys, Paul and Tyler, both, about a bunch of stuff. And I can do, if I need something or have a question on how to approach this or something like that, those guys help me, no questions asked. So that's how all that went together. And then it spilled into this nonsense. So unfortunately, you guys get my takes. I just named some of the influences that I have. There are certainly others.
Sure.
Peter Bukowski is certainly a big one as well. As you know, and granted, I get it. Not a lot of people are big fans of his, but I will tell you that guy will give you the shirt off of his back. So there is a little, I don't agree with him on everything he says and does, like,
Sure.
but who does, right? I don't agree with everything Matt and Don say and do either. That's kind of the beautiful nature of this whole thing. That's the way this is supposed to work, right?
Yep.
But it really kind of started, like I said, in 2007 with Sam Zuba. Then I met Jersey Al and did some stuff with Packers Talk, and now it's kind of spilled all into this stuff. And I have a pretty solid relationship, I think, with most of your big Packers content creators. And I think it would be cool one day to maybe get all of us in the same, or as many of us as possible, in the same room and just kind of chop it up for a little while.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Film it.
Right.
Yeah.
Live stream it, please.
So what do you think, did Bill share with you, or did you share his thoughts about Gutekunst's future? Do you know what he saw in him? Did you discuss it, or did you see something in him as well?
At the time, he was very well spoken, but I also wondered how much of that has to do with the fact that and again, God bless Ted Thompson, rest in peace. But how much of that has to do with the fact that I'm comparing him to Ted Thompson? I mentioned earlier, I am the 21-year-old intern asking him a question about HaHa Clinton Dix, who he just picked. He's the Super Bowl winning Packers Hall of Famer, Ted Thompson. I am just me, and he's the one who's more nervous in this setting. That's just kind of how Ted was. But yeah, he was very well spoken. He was smart. Just kind of things you see now with Gutekunst when he talks is he's good with the media. He handles things. I think he handles things pretty well. I think he's got a little bit of that Ron Wolf arrogance to him, and I mean that in a good way.
You have to have it to be a GM. I mean,
I think you do too. And granted, I'm not the biggest fan of Brian. I don't think he's perfect by any stretch. I think he's done a good job. I think there are some missteps that have cost the team in certain spots. I don't know that and I'll be interested to see what he does here now that he's not with Rodgers anymore. But, his general vision for the team, I don't agree with the way that it's gone since he's taken over. But, what is that all a byproduct of? There's a lot of things that go into this, but in general, I wrote an article for Packer Report, which was kind of cool that came full circle. I interned there. Now I write for them again. Gutekunst has built this team to win by playing defense and running the football, which sounds cool until you realize it's not 1998 anymore. And that's not how, you watch the Super Bowl. You've got to be able to score points, and you got to be able to score them quickly. And I know the Eagles had the best rushing offense in football, but Jalen Hurts was also an MVP candidate. And I feel like I gush about this kid every time I see him, but I cannot speak highly enough of Jalen Hurts. I don't know how much attention you guys have paid to Jalen since last year, but I always get painted as a Rodgers hater when I talk about some of this stuff. After watching the way that Rodgers has handled things over the last few years, and then Jalen Hurts comes up, and I remember at his press conference after the NFC Championship game, he had a couple different things where somebody was people didn't really want you to be the Eagles quarterback or whatever. And he said, I had a purpose before they had an opinion. And I was I love that answer.
That's a good line.
I love that. And just his way of I think his, granted, I'm not in the locker room every day. I don't know this stuff, but his way of leading that team, I think there's no question that they follow his lead, which is interesting. It's an interesting dynamic because of Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. There's a lot of guys that have been there for a really long time. But yeah, I love Jalen Hurts. I think he might be my favorite player in the NFL that doesn't play for the Packers. So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I got nothing but good stuff to say about him myself for sure. Before I get too far away from it, I do want to mention real fast that it's been interesting with the guests we've talked to who have been content creators for a while. I feel like it always somehow comes back to Jersey Al.
OG, man. Yeah.
You said OG, yeah. And it's he's this nexus for everything that's come after. It almost feels like that, so many people like at some point he found them, or they connected with him, and they just went from there. I don't know. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, if you look at like the pyramid scheme that is Packers content creation, and I'm joking when I say that, but it starts with She Said TV, Aaron Nagler and Corey Benke, and that was the inspiration for a lot of stuff that has come since then. Acme Packing Company, I believe, came after that. Everything like that. I don't think a lot of that stuff exists without that group. And then Jersey Al is like, that's the three people, if you will, of that group. I don't agree with everything that goes on in that particular setting, but that just kind of is what it is. But Al, yeah, I can't have enough good things to say about him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's good to hear that Bill Huber has been good to you. We love Bill. I actually met him the same day I met you. Yeah, because I just happened to catch him. Yeah, he was walking to the stadium, walking to work, and I was like, Bill, hey, Matt Pickett, like, because we'd interacted a little bit, and he was like super like friendly and willing to like stop and talk for a few minutes and like took a selfie, and like he didn't have to do that. He could have been like, I got work to do, guy. What would get out of my way? But no, he was just really friendly, and it was.
I will say this about and this might be true of all the other places as well, but when it comes to the Packers beat, there are some people that definitely think they're more important than other people. I've had, and I can't speak for the people that I haven't met, so I'm not going to but Bill is definitely not one of those people that thinks like, I call it the I'm a real journalist club. There are people that think like, oh, I'm a real journalist, so I don't have time for bloggers and which is, I understand it to some degree. It's a changing industry. When I was in college, blogging and stuff like this was relatively new. And I understand like seeing the industry change. In my industry right now, I've been in healthcare for almost 10 years, and it is ever changing. That's just kind of the nature of it, and not liking it because this is how things have worked for so long. But there are definitely people that think they're more important than others. So I think that it's good to note that Bill is not one of those people. And I think he's got a very good understanding of, one of my favorite quotes that I ever have. I don't know if you guys are fans of the band Shinedown, but their lead singer's name is Brent Smith. And at every concert that I've ever been to, and I've seen them quite a few times, he says, you are the audience and you decide who goes and who stays. And that's kind of what Bill was telling me once upon a time, is like the audience decides. So like, if nobody watches this show, you're going to lose interest, I would imagine. Maybe not, but for the most part, eventually, and maybe this isn't the greatest example, but like,
well, for a lot of shows, that's true. I will say this is a weird instance, perhaps because like for Dawn and I to have the chance to just talk Packers together every week,
we're going to be here no matter what.
Like, yeah.
Maybe the example I should give is if some places, like a place like the Athletic, for example, is requiring subscriptions, and that is how people make their money in everyday life. That is who the audience decides who gets out.
Right.
If you're trying to do that, then that's how the audience decides who goes. The music industry, if I don't listen to the album, then they don't go on tour. That they don't do whatever. But that's what I think when it comes to Bill. He's, like I said, as good as it gets. We're not friends by any stretch, but if I ever see him, I always make sure to tell him hello and that I appreciate him, because my life's definitely different if I've never met him before.
Is Bill a Wisconsin native?
I don't know if he's from there. I know
he sounds like he is, but he's not a Packer fan, right? I mean,
Bill, so my take on that is that everybody is they became football fans somehow. Bill may not care one way or the other if the team wins or loses, and maybe he doesn't. But I always think everybody has a rooting interest of some sort. So Bill, he'll probably hate that I told you guys this, but he played tight end at UW Whitewater.
I didn't know that.
And so he played tight end at Whitewater, and he lived in one of the towns just outside of Green Bay. I don't know if he still lives there or not. I went to his house like twice when I was an intern, and that was really it. It was crazy. I saw a picture of his kids like the other day, and I was like, holy bleep. Like they are grown up. Oh my gosh. Yes. They were tiny the last time I saw. Granted, I was in, a lot of things are different since then, but that was that was a lot of fun to see. But yeah, he lives in Wisconsin. I believe he's from there. I know he went to UW Whitewater. And he's been on the Packers beat for, I think he's the second longest tenured other than Tom Silverstein. I could be wrong by that.
Right.
But I think other than Spoon, it's him.
Oh, I thought so because I mean he sounds like he's from Wisconsin, and I don't know if he says that he's not technically a Packer fan just because he's trying to be neutral and do his job, but I thought I got the impression that he wasn't a Packer fan, so to speak.
Well, I mean, he and Schneidman have talked about how the beat writers have to be
right
Packers fans. They have to be neutral so they can just write about it. So there's that. But I mean, he must have grown up liking the Packers, right?
I mean, if you're from Wisconsin, how can you say? But now Schneiderman is from New York, so it's easier for him. It's just a little different when they're somebody who's actually born and raised in Wisconsin and covering the Packers. So and played football for Whitewater, so that's like even more. Yeah.
Be sure to let him know that you found that out, Matt. I'm sure he'll be thrilled that I told you that. So
I'll do a little YouTube short and send it to him.
There you go.
That's very cool. Well, speaking of how you became a Packer fan, your Twitter bio, it says, I just lost it. Son of Rick's son, Blake and Deacon's daddy, Rick's son, Game on Wisconsin, and then at Packer Report 66, and then your Substack, which everybody should be subscribed to. So you told us how old Blake and Deacon were, and thank you for that. I was wondering. Adorable pictures, which we used in our thumbnail. So tell us about your dad. You're Rick's son, and he was a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Was he from that area?
No, my dad was born in Fulton, Illinois, and he lived in Morrison. He just kind of grew up. He was born in 1967, so he kind of grew up in the era of like Ron Jaworski, and that group of Philadelphia Eagles. Watched them lose the Super Bowl to the Raiders in 1980. And then when I was growing up, I think Ty Detmer was their starting quarterback with the first game I ever watched. And my dad would always have football on Sundays, and just like I wanted to watch cartoons. He'd be like, no, man, trust me, like football is cool. Like, that's what, this is where it's at kind of thing. Well, I don't know if he knew the monster he was creating, because I mean, again, my priorities have changed as I've gotten older. I used to say the happiest day of my life was February 6, 2011, which of course is when the Packers won Super Bowl 45. 12 years later, I am very thankful to say that is not the happiest day of my life anymore. And I thought it always would be, to be honest with you, because at the time I was 19 years old. I didn't have any kids, anything like that. But yeah, he went through that. And then he told me that he was an Eagles fan. And I remember kind of watching a Monday Night Football game that year, and it was Packers and Eagles. And it was the first time the Packers had been on Monday Night Football at Lambeau Field in like forever, which I learned after the fact. And the Packers beat the crap out of the Eagles that night. And I just, I am your typical 90s kid, Packers fan. Brett Favre, my first vivid memory that I can remember is Brett Favre running around the Superdome with his helmet above his head.
Yeah.
Brett Favre was my hero growing up. There's, and I'm not going to shy away from that. I think people can deal with his personal shortcomings as now has happened, and however they want to deal with them. The way that I would say it is trying to like erase your memories of him just robs you. And I wouldn't, I just, there's too much joy in what I learned growing up watching him play football, for me to take that away from myself. I think that you can do that and still acknowledge that taking money and sexually harassing women is a bad thing. I don't mean to laugh because it's not funny. But yeah, that's how I became a fan of that. And then I kind of grew up a little bit though. And you got to the end of that 90s Packers era where they were playing in Super Bowl 31, they lost Super Bowl 32. And then I got a little bit older, and I spent a lot of time in the 2000s rooting for those Philadelphia Eagle teams because the Packers weren't good enough to like advance farther in the playoffs than those Eagles teams. Those Eagles teams, that's Andy Reid, Donovan McNabb, that kind of group that played. I think they played in like 5 straight NFC championships or something like that. So if you guys think the Packers have bad luck in the NFC championship game, little history lesson for you. I watched that Eagles team lose 3 in a row, 3 years in a row.
No.
2 of them were at home. And they were favored to win in 2 of those 3 games. And then the 4th year they played against Michael Vick and the Falcons and they won. Went to the Super Bowl and then they lost to Brady. That was their 3rd in 4 years or whatever that was. But yeah, I spent a lot of time there. And then obviously, the Packers still were always my favorite team, but we kind of had this unspoken agreement between the 2 of us. Like if we're not playing each other, we're rooting for the other team. I lived with him during the 4th and 26 game. That was not fun. Let me think. I learned a lot about football kind of in general. He was a really good football player when he was younger. And he's, the reason for a lot of things that I am, good and bad, but, I learned a lot. So it was cool watching, I was admittedly gutted when the Eagles lost the Super Bowl this year. I don't shy away from that. I am a Packers fan first and foremost, but certainly the Eagles have always been number 2, and that's even truer now with everything that's happened in the last year or so. Mm-hmm. The other cool thing about it, and it's even cooler now, like looking back on everything, was I was in Minnesota for Super Bowl 52. So when the Eagles beat the Patriots, I was in the stadium.
Nice.
Yeah, my claim to fame is it's a very blurred version, but I am in a picture of the Philly special.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I'll have to find it if I can again. Monty shared a picture of it like not that long ago, and then I was like, holy, that's me! Like I'd been looking and looking and looking for so long, like to see like did I show up anywhere, and I was in that picture.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I put that in my bio after he passed away.
Yeah.
I don't shy away from that. I think something that I've tried to do over the last year, this is an unfortunate fraternity to be in. And it's not something that ever goes away. I think what I've tried to do with it is if there is somebody else that is in that with me, let those people know they're not alone. And this is another one where I learned like, as good of a person as Todd Varney is, and he'll probably hate that I said that to you guys too, because he has a reputation to uphold. But I will. Todd drove from wherever the hell he was to my dad's service. And he's kind of been a nice. I'm not saying I talk to him every day about anything like that, but it's been a nice like thing to have him there for. Because unfortunately he's talked about this too. So I'm not breaking any news there.
No, yeah.
But he's in this group as well. So that's kind of been my thing is trying to find, if there are other people, then, feel your feelings and it's okay to feel them. It's okay to talk about them and it's okay to grieve however it is that you want to. Like I said, my social media pages, I'm an open book and I don't do that because I want attention because I don't really care about that stuff. Most of the time it's like I share pictures of my kids because I love my kids. I talk about my dad because I love my dad. I very much go by the Vince Lombardi way that he told his players of what their priorities were. He said, your religion, your family, and the Green Bay Packers. That's in a different sense. That's how I am. So that's kind of how that works. But yeah, definitely. I am not as big of a football fan as I am without my dad's influence. And that was something that it was kind of fun. I remember I told this story last night. And they were playing the 49ers in 2021. It was the year they ended up losing to them in the playoffs, but this was the regular season game. And every so often my dad would have to give me some message on like how he thought this game was going or whatever. Well, that game, if you guys remember, they're down 1 and Rodgers hits like 2 passes to Devontae, and all of a sudden they're in field goal range. And my dad sent me a text that said, "This effing guy." So from then until the end of everything, that was what I that was what we called Aaron Rodgers, was this effing guy. Just because that was kind of the magic of having Aaron Rodgers. And I know, I've said some things that are critical about him, but that was part of what made him fun to watch, was the ability to do some stuff like that. But that was a lot of fun to go through some of that stuff. And this year, like I said, watching the Packers kind of stunk, but being able to watch the Eagles get as close as they did, unfortunately, a holding penalty to kind of took away all the drama that was the end of the game. But you know what? I'm also a believer that if Jalen doesn't fumble, if they don't give up a stupid punt return or what, the Eagles could have won. Sure. And I think they'll be back. I think there's a lot of talk about how they'll regress and do all this stuff. But I kind of mentioned, I think Jalen Hurts is special. So I think they'll be maybe not immediately, maybe not like next year, but I do think they'll be back, and I do think they'll win.
Well, with the NFC being so not awesome, know, there's a lot of opportunities for teams that can get their stuff together to really go far into the playoffs and get to the Super Bowl for sure. It's a good time to be an NFC team if you can get some momentum going for sure.
Yeah, I was watching them all year. I was really rooting for them in the Super Bowl. But very, very fun to watch the Philadelphia Eagles last year. And no reason to believe. I mean, sure, it's hard to maintain that level. And usually there is some kind of digression, but
if there's anything that we've learned, though, is if you have the quarterback, then you always have at least a puncher's chance. And, Brandy, I'm sorry. As far as
we are really
sorry. I'm the wrong guy. I love Patrick Mahomes, and maybe it's because I don't live around there. I love Pat. I think he's the best quarterback I have ever seen, other than Tom Brady. And already, I think that, which is wild that's how his career's gone. But he's phenomenal.
Absolutely. Well, before we go to the next question, I just want to take a second to say, Jacob, that I really appreciate you being vulnerable and open and honest about grieving and your dad, because that's something that's hard for people to talk about. It's something that of course, men in our society are discouraged from
absolutely
being open about. So I just want to say, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Like I told you guys before the show, I'm an open book. So, I feel like I'd be lying to you if I didn't do that. I'm not telling you guys anything I haven't been willing to. One of my favorite things that happened when I was younger was when somebody would post a cryptic message on Facebook or Twitter, or, whatever social media page. And then you ask them hey, what's going on? Well, that's none of your business. No, man, you put that on the internet. It's everybody's business.
Right.
So, you can't say as many things as I have about my family and my kids and everything like that. And then have somebody ask you and be like, no, man, F off. It's not your business. No, I made it everybody's business. Complete strangers know this story.
Yeah. And he was far too young. He was younger. I'm older than your dad.
55. Yeah. He turned 55 on January 7th. He passed away on January 24th.
Too young.
Super tragic, Jacob. Super tragic. And that's just not natural. I mean, that young. So it's okay. I'm sure you don't need to hear it from us because you seem to be handling it really well. But the openness, I think, is very healing for others as well.
Yeah, I would say, the 1 year anniversary was a couple months ago. The end of the firsts doesn't make things easier because I don't like saying it like that, but it's almost like, okay, this is reality.
Yeah.
But then you still get, there are still days where it's just damn, man, that. I mean, for example, I bought my new truck and they have these text message things you get. Well, my brother has my dad's phone from that time. That just made, with everything that worked out, it just made sense for that. Well, he sent me a text message and my contact is whatever the old one was. So it just said dad. And I was like, what the No. I'm not tripping balls or anything like that. It's just, I got to fix this is what that kind of means. But it can happen, some days it's cool. Cool is not the right word, but some days everything's okay.
Yeah.
And then some days it's well, it's totally okay. It's your show. You don't have to apologize. It's your show. Some days everything hits you like a ton of bricks. That's just kind of how it is. And I don't know. I certainly hope you guys aren't in this club, and if you aren't, then I hope you never are. So, That's my hope and thought and prayer for you guys is that you never are. But that's also, I understand as I say that to you, that's not based in reality, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad actually, just a quick side note, gave us a scare last week. He was in the hospital for a few days, but
I saw that. Yes, he's doing well. Good.
Yep, doing well now. So
I didn't see that, Maddie.
Yeah, he's doing it right now. Fortunately, that's
Good.
that's one thing. He feels back to normal and everything. And
good.
Oof, yeah, there's a little touch and go for a minute there, but
it's no fun. I mean, my dad's gone, and when someone dies young, it's one thing, but it's still really hard, even when they've lived a longer life. And my mom's not super young now, and so we go through lots of scares and watching this and that, and it's just not. It's just the Bible says death is our enemy. You know, it's probably the hardest thing that people have to deal with. It's not.
Yeah.
And
I don't think it makes a difference. I've wondered, would it be any better? Like my mom's dad, my grandpa passed away when I was 12, but that was like he had lung cancer and it just kind of slowly ate him. And I apologize. That's probably a really crass way to say that, but it's true. And they knew they knew it was going to happen and that it was only a matter of time. Like with my situation, it was a 3:00 in the afternoon phone call and I rolled my eyes. I will never forget that because it was my mom. And I was like, what the hell could my mom possibly need at 3:00 on a Monday morning? Mm-hmm. And she was in a panic and said, your dad's going to the hospital. And I was like, okay, everything's going to be fine. Like, that's kind of my role in this. But then I ran out of the office and I was an hour away from Rockford. Mm-hmm. And thank God I didn't get pulled over. Because I mean, the speed limit was a mere suggestion at that point. But I don't think it makes a difference. I don't need to tell you guys that entire story. But I don't think it makes a difference either way. It's like you said, death is our enemy. I think that's a fair way to put it. And it's hard to, even when you see signs and symptoms and, I don't know what everybody believes on everything like that. If you believe in an afterlife, then you believe you'll see them again. That doesn't make things easier right now. I can tell you that much from my belief system. It doesn't make things easier for me right now.
Yeah.
But, it is comforting to some degree, like, and I'm not here to tell people what to believe. I'm not here to go through that stuff. I think you guys have gathered. I don't talk about my religion on public forums or anything like that because I don't want to feel like I'm telling anybody what to believe, but that is what I believe. So it's comforting that way in my situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's good. Well, we've talked a little bit about all of the things you've done for the Packer community for all these years. And so, and I know you've scaled back because you've reprioritized, but you still do you do have your Substack and you do have Packers Report. So how do you get all this done, and how do you who supports you so that you can get all these things done?
Prioritizing of my time. I think I learned time management when I was in college. That was a nice skill to have learned. The nice part about my Substack is I can do it whenever I want. The reason I created it was I don't care if anybody, well, I shouldn't say I don't care, but like, if anybody reads it, that's fine. If they don't, that's okay too. I don't know how to turn off the paid option. So if you ever get an email asking for money or something like that, that does not come from me. I do not want your money. What I wanted out of that was sometimes on there, and recently, especially, I've been writing a lot about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers and all that sort of stuff. But there are other pieces on there. I wrote a story about the NBA I wrote something about my thoughts on the NBA trade deadline and LeBron James breaking the scoring record because I haven't had a chance to do that. I wrote an entire breakdown of my favorite video game, which is Metal Gear Solid. And I just wanted somewhere that I could write stuff like that because for so long I've done so much stuff of just Packers. Yeah. So now, like, if I want to write about, I think my first post was right before the Eagles were going to play in the Super Bowl. So if I want to write about how, like, what are my feelings as the Eagles are about to play in the Super Bowl and everything like that, I don't really have I can't do that on Game On Wisconsin because nobody's coming there to read that. I can't do that on Packer Report because it's Packers website.
Right.
If you subscribe to my Substack, then you wanted to hear my thoughts. So, so if you don't want to hear my thoughts, you can unsubscribe at any time, and I do not take any offense to that. But to answer your question as to my support system, my wife and kids. That's number one. My mom has come to like everything. I remember, oh my God, my mom you guys remember that story about like Jason and Travis Kelce's mom of going to one game in Philadelphia. And then that was my mom when I was younger. And I tell her all the time, like, maybe I didn't notice it back then. Since you mentioned something earlier, you may not know now, but one day you'll understand. That's something that's in the Bible as well. And now I understand just how important that was, that raining, freezing her ass off to watch me play high school football. Like, that is an irreplaceable thing that cannot do. They always say, like, your kids won't know or they won't remember what you bought them. They won't remember what you got them. They won't remember that stuff, but they'll remember that you were there. So my mom was at all my games. Didn't matter what it was, and didn't matter the temperature. Didn't matter anything. Like, if she missed a game, it was because there was no other option. And the same has been true in my adult life. We ran a party a couple years ago at the Green Bay Distillery. My parents and my brother came all the way from Rockford to Green Bay on a day trip to be at the party, watch me get stupid drunk and have a little bit of fun. That was bad. But it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. And then, as far as sports, I always said, everything I do for my two littles. That's where your life changes.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff, it becomes not about you anymore. And I'm totally okay with that. That's that level of inspiration on that stuff. But yeah, that's definitely the group that allows me to take care of all those things. And my wife is a rock star when it comes to being a mom. So I'm very lucky that way, because I've seen, unfortunately, that the town I live in, I've seen enough parents on both sides of that coin. And that's the hardest adjustment. Like I was talking about earlier, when you become a parent, it's not, you're not the center focus of your own life anymore. And that's a hard adjustment for some people to make it. Some don't ever make it. And that's sad when that happens. But both of us, thankfully, I think have done a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, clearly a great support system for all the great stuff you've been able to continue to create, all the content that you've put out there for all the fans. So it's awesome.
Yeah, she lets me work Sundays at Packer games and stuff like that. So I mean, I cannot complain when it comes to stuff like that.
Well, yay for her. That's fantastic.
That's right.
So one thing you love the most about Packers Twitter are the online community for, maybe more broadly NFL, Eagles, Packers, Twitter. And one thing you would change if you had the power to change it.
Yeah, one thing I love about it is the relationships that you're able to build. Like I mentioned, I've made friends with a lot of people. It was cool that, like, in November when the Packers played the Eagles, I had written an article about how, like, this is the first time these two ever played each other, and my dad's not here to watch it. We're not here to go over everything like that. So somebody that runs, his name's Joe Castro. It's called Philly, the podcast. It is the best intro I have ever seen. He wrote his own like rap song, and it's really good, guys. I mean, I can't even, it's kind of like a jam. But he found the article and had me come on his show. And I think that's kind of cool. Just the connections you can make from a bunch of, Duke Backus. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he's a pastor in middle of Nowheresville, Texas. Like, I've been able to cultivate a relationship with him, and he lives in, and people all the way in California. Jason Perone stood up in my wedding. He lives in Arizona. It's funny to me to look at how, like, when I was younger and the internet, and I started getting into like having websites and chat rooms and stuff, and they tell you, like, don't give any personal information. Don't make friends with people you meet on the internet. And now, like, my best friends, a lot of them are people I've met on the internet. So I appreciate that part. Matt, we could stand in a beer garage for 2.5 hours and root against the Vikings and get ready to go watch the Packers play. And that's a lot of fun. That is the best part. And I've become such good, like, I mentioned Paul Brettel and Dan Kotnick and Maggie Loney and just people that have like kids my age now and everything like that too, is we're able to, I think we were talking about, we'll see if it actually is able to come to fruition, but doing a Packers people with kids preseason game or something like that, or family night, we all go together or something like that. Like that stuff's pretty cool. What I would change. Oh gosh. The inability of people to read everything that you're saying. The fact that like I can be critical of Aaron Rodgers and I can say that he lied about going into the darkness retreat and then only after that finding out he's being shopped, which he said on January 31st, there were some interesting trade conversations taking place after being asked about him being shopped. So I don't know how you didn't know if you had said that in his own words. I could say all that and still love him, the player. And I do. Some of the greatest joys I've ever had have been watching him play quarterback.
Absolutely.
But you cannot say like there's such a, and this isn't just related to Aaron Rodgers. This could be related to anything. You say one thing and they read that little sentence and that is it. And I know there's a difficult, Twitter now can be like 837 characters, but I refuse to pay for it. So mine is only whatever the limit is. So, but in that short amount of characters, you're only going to learn so much. Basically, I wish people would read more than the headline.
Yep.
That's what would change.
Yeah,
that's good. I think people, because we asked that question to all our guests, people tend to say like, oh, the fighting, whatever. It's like, that's a really good, insightful.
Right.
If people just read the whole thing and not just react right away, that's good. It's good.
And it's a good one too, because and everyone has a little bit of a different answer too. So I'm always surprised. Like it's going to sound really boring and like everybody's going to say the same thing, but they don't. But it also it can overlap into non-Twitter, just communication. Like humans are nuanced and multidimensional. They're not necessarily like the Favre thing that you said. You can compartmentalize enjoying the memories that you had. You don't have to take that away from yourself, really, because you even mentioned you're just robbing yourself by trying to do that. And also having the thoughts about, what the crimes that he may or may not have committed in this situation. They're two separate things. It's certainly the same person, but it doesn't make you bad because you still enjoy his memories, the memories that you had as a child. I have somebody that I'm fairly close to that I met on Packers Twitter who insists that I hate Aaron Rodgers every time she speaks to me. It's like, and I'm not going to defend myself. It's like, no, it's much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you have to feel a need to defend yourself to people on the internet. Number one.
No, about somebody I don't even know. Like,
right. That's the other part when it came to Rodgers is I'm always like, I don't care. Like when everybody's like, oh, his view on this, his view on that, he went on this show, whatever. Like me, and again, I'm not here to tell people what to care about. I'm not here to tell people how to feel. Me personally, I do not care about his vaccination status. I do not care about his going on Joe Rogan's podcast or anything like that. And I don't care about those things because I am not friends with him. And you're not family members. Like what he thinks and does, like the response to that I get from some people, and I understand the response, but is like Rodgers has such a huge platform and he could affect, like somebody might now think that those things are okay to think. And I'm like, that's a them problem. No, if they are that influenced by a stranger, then that is their fault. That is not the person's fault.
Yeah.
I personally don't think.
That's a good point.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Well, so it's that time in our show.
Oh, it's that time, Dawn.
It's that time in our show where we transition over to our superlatives for the week. So, Jacob, did you bring some superlatives? Are you going to stay on for our superlatives?
I did. I did bring a couple. I don't know if they're like any good, but
they're great. Everyone says that.
They're all good. All good.
All good. So how about we hear Jacob's and then mine and then Maddie?
Perfect.
So instead
let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. So what did you bring?
I'm trying to find them because I know I wrote them in this show prep. You guys,
I know.
which I give you guys a ton of credit because this is the most diverse and most thorough show prep I've ever seen. And now
it needs to be said. It is all Dawn. I just plug my stuff into it, so it's
okay.
Okay,
well, kudos to Dawn. That's not overly surprising, Matt, but no, I'm just kidding. You know what? It looks like mine got. They didn't save or whatever, but I do remember them. And what I wanted to do was,
I wonder if I typed over them because I thought they were from last.
It's possible. I do remember some of them. Mine were, what I wanted to do was highlight people that are maybe a little bit. Everybody knows who Andy Herman and Peter Bukowski and people like that are, and that's not to discredit those guys. They know who they are for a reason. But I kind of wanted to just highlight some under the radar people with stuff like that. So that's kind of it's a superlative, but it's for two people specifically.
Most under the radar.
Yeah. So that is Sam Hallman, who does stuff for Wisconsin Sports Heroics. He's done some stuff for Game On Wisconsin. I think he's brilliant. And everybody looks at things they want to know and how they take their content and everything differently. Me, what I want to do when I log in, the goofy, funny, whatever type stuff is cool. It does make me laugh and everything like that. But I want to learn more about football and what people think they're watching versus what they're seeing. I know it got made fun of when he was the coach of the Bears, but when Matt Nagy would always say, like, find the why, like, why did this happen?
Yeah.
When people are like, oh, it's 3rd and 1. Why is Rodgers throwing deep? It's like, well, like the play in Miami, for example, that comes to my mind. It's 4th and 1 and Rodgers throws a bomb to Christian Watson and it lands like 5 yards over his head, but he's open by like 4 or 5 yards too. It's like, that's not the wrong thing. It just ended wrong. And I want to find out why it ended that way. Well, in that case, it was as simple as he just overshot him. But there's other things that, like, why did he do this instead of this or whatever? And sometimes the answer, and I appreciate the people that are willing to say, I don't know. But I think Sam's very good at highlighting some stuff, especially as far as line play goes. Because I think that a lot of people don't know how to evaluate that and or don't care. So I think he's very good. And then I have Mike Kawano, who's like the Swiss Army knife, jack of all trades type stuff. Mike has been on many. I really enjoy his time difference because he's in Hawaii. So when the Packers play a Sunday night game and I have to drive back from Green Bay to Rockford, which is about 3.5 hours at 11 o'clock at night, he stays on the phone with me because it's only like 7 o'clock over there. So it's really nice to be able to go through some of that stuff. But again, he's another guy who I think has a really good feel for like what he's watching, why things are happening. And like, I appreciate people that have opinions that are able to explain them, even if I don't agree with them necessarily. Do you explain the reasons you feel the way that you do, or are you just following like what is conventional Twitter wisdom with some stuff like that? So I appreciate Mike, and I don't think that those two guys specifically get enough credit and have a big enough following, which, maybe they don't care about stuff like that. That's certainly possible too. But I learned a lot of stuff from them. One other guy that just came to mind that I want to throw out there is Isaac Gregg. Isaac he used to write for Game On Wisconsin. He doesn't write for anywhere specifically now, but he's got a lot of like draft takes that he puts on his Twitter timeline. His cousin is Noah Gregg and works at the distillery. So he got us hooked up with some of their managers and stuff like that. So I appreciate it. But I think Isaac, like I mentioned earlier, I'm always appreciative of the people that do their homework instead of like the people who sit on draft night and they'll watch and they'll see Green Bay picks this guy and they'll say like, oh, why didn't they pick a receiver? Or, just because that's the common one, right? What did this happen? Why did this happen? Just stuff like that. I think they do a good job of understanding like why they think the way they think certain things. So those are my three. I'll shut up. I could do this.
Those are great. Those are wonderful because I don't think I've heard of the last two, the second two. Noah and I already forgot the guy from Hawaii.
Isaac and Mike.
Isaac and Mike.
Yeah. I've been a huge Sam Holman cheerleader since he was first kind of coming on the scene, and so I love anytime somebody else says something good about him. I'm like, yes, Sam is that guy.
We love Sam.
Yeah, he's like new defensive. He's like boring position Dusty Evely, because like Dusty will tell you, I only do offense. I only do this stuff because that's what I want to do, and I appreciate Dusty because Dusty's going to tell you I'm doing what I want to do, and it's because I want to do it, and that's all I want to do, and that's cool. Sam does that, but with the stuff that Dusty doesn't do.
So, right. Yeah. The two of those together are just everything.
Yeah.
Sam's thorough understanding of how defense works and the way he's able to break it down and communicate it just blows me away. It's amazing. And if I can talk about Mike for a second, without getting into too much of the weeds on this, I'm in a group chat that includes Mike and Katie Sunderman and a lot of other really amazing people. And I love it. It's a very common thing for Katie to ask a really good question and Mike to jump in with like screens and screens and screens of like really insightful
sounds like Mike.
Yeah, answers to her questions. He impresses me like every week. There's something he throws in there that's like, oh, I hadn't considered that. He's just the nicest, smartest dude out there. Huge fan of Mike Kawano. Glad I just shouted him out here today.
Fantastic. And Brandy's still with us, and Brandy enjoys Pack-A-Day and coffee.
I appreciate that because I am on that show. So the Tuesday shows, the Tuesday? Yeah, we come out on Tuesdays. Ross, Morley, and myself. That's the best one. The other days are cool too, but like the best one is on Tuesday.
Tuesday is a very good one. Definitely. It's one of my favorite ones for sure, man. Not just saying what you're sitting here, but
one of like, what do I got to do to remove the one of? What's your Venmo?
You know, the thing is, if you listen to more than 3 episodes in a row, you'll hear us talk about the Wednesday crew, you know, so there's that.
Friday. We like
speaking
Friday.
of Dusty.
But I always say Tuesday too. Yeah, so Tuesday.
I enjoy, what's today? Thursday. Echo and Jason. I think Mark is a excellent storyteller. And I'm a bit of a historian when it comes to stuff. And Mark's a Packers fan, used to cover the Eagles. So there's a lot of overlap on there. And I will tell you this, if you guys, Mark tells the story every so often, so listen closely on his episodes. But Mark's story of Reggie White and coming to Green Bay is phenomenal. And Mark jokingly gives himself credit, so I will jokingly give him credit. And there's some cool stories about like the Packers losing to the Eagles in the playoffs. And he covered the 2010 playoff game when we beat them. And ended up going to the Super Bowl that year. But yeah, there's the story basically is after each game, the 4th and 26 game, Andy Reid asks, is Eckel okay? Like, is he going to be all right? Because we won instead of the Packers. Well, then after the 2010 game, Eckel's first question was, are you all right? So yeah.
I love it. Okay.
Awesome.
I have, I don't know, somewhat of a theme. I think, no, not really. Most Empathetic by Eli, the Book of Eli.
Rookie.
Yep. And
Probably shouldn't call him that anymore, but
I think it was a tweet. He said, imagine becoming, hold on, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was a tweet. Imagine becoming the starting quarterback of a franchise who's had Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers for the last 30 years. No player in NFL and parentheses sports, ? Good question. History is going to begin their career with more pressure than Jordan Love. Yeah.
That's right. Keep that in mind. Yeah, it's a good point for Eli, definitely.
Yeah. So most empathetic. So humans can always become a little more empathetic, unless you're an empath, and then you need to just tone it down a little bit.
there's a middle space somewhere like that.
But most people aren't that. So, okay, second one, most welcome subtitle. And this comes from Thursday Cheese Curds, and that is by at Text Western, Evan Text Western. Packard, and this is the title of his article, Packers uncertainty shifts from Rodgers to status to Love's future. And the subtitle, Jordan Love is the captain now. And that was just really nice to hear. But it was actually a really nice article with a kind of a brief summary of kind of what happened over the last couple of weeks. But also it has a nice compilation of coverages across the league. And if you're anything like myself and you wanted to stay off Twitter and avoid the drama, so he mentions an ESPN article titled "Aaron Rodgers leaves a complicated Packers legacy, exits like Favre." From The Athletic, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. From The Athletic, saying farewell to a legend and welcoming in a fresh start. I'm sorry, that was Packers Wire. From The Athletic, Aaron Rodgers says Packers shifted tone. I'm wanting him back. Something changed. And
He
then
lied.
something changed. Yes. The whole, yeah. Okay.
His story
His story
changed.
changed.
Yes, he's right.
Yeah, something changes a lot for him. So, yeah, from Packers Wire, saying farewell to a legend and welcoming in a fresh start. From Sports Illustrated, these are all linked in this article. So and he does a little summary. You don't even have to read the article if you don't want. It's really nice. Sports Illustrated, the Jordan Love era has, well, has arrived after Packers trade Aaron Rodgers, and then something from the Milwaukee Sentinel, something from Packers.com, and then at the end, this is interesting, from mlive.com, and I don't understand what it's doing here, but I'm going to share it because it's random, and I love random things. Sloth bites team during visit to Michigan pet store, ruining lifelong dream.
What?
I have no idea what it's doing there, but that was at the end of the article. So nice little compilation and summary if you want to look at some of those articles or headlines.
That's handy. Yeah. I mean, Tex is such a great writer, first of all, in the first place, but then also have those all compiled. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like a brief history of the things that you have been avoiding for the last 2 weeks on purpose.
I just appreciate that it's called cheese curds.
Yeah.
I know. I love that. Thursday cheese curds. I love that so much. And then most demanding. And this is hot. Wink, wink. I guess I do have a theme here. We can all figure out what it is. And this comes from Andy Herman. This is he quote tweeted Tom Pelissaro, and Tom wrote tweeted, "The Jets are re-signing offensive line Adam Pankey per source." And Adam quote tweeted that and said, "Clearly was on Rodgers' list of demands." Which also isn't a thing, right? He didn't have a demands list.
Yeah. Like, or isn't. I don't know.
The whole, so those are my superlatives. Just kind of fun. And, I do appreciate that people are covering things and I also I think I mentioned, I really appreciate the way the Packers are handling this, and hopefully they're, if this may extend out till June 1st, right? So that they can get everything so they can get all the money that they deserve for this trade. Mm-hmm. The only thing is that can kind of mess up the draft, and then
it'll be next week. I think I
think so too.
Trey Wingo is the one who said the Rodgers deal is done.
Right.
Which I believe what you can gather from the reporting now is that meant Rodgers told them he wants to play and wants to play for the Jets. Mm-hmm. And Rodgers confirmed as much on the Frat Boy Punters show on Wednesday. Sorry, whatever.
I won't watch that show.
It's not a mischaracterization. I mean,
no, I will say now I shouldn't say I'm thankful, but Rodgers going somewhere else means I never have to watch that show again.
I was thinking that.
Which again, that is
watched it, but I never have to hear about it.
It's no disrespect to Pat McAfee. He's really smart. He's obviously a business genius. That is just not my cup of tea.
Same.
But at any rate, I think what you can gather from the reporting is that's Rodgers telling him that. He confirmed as much that he said on Friday his decision was to play for the Jets. Well, Wingo is now saying that he thought at the time it could go into next week. My take on it as a Packers fan is I don't really care when it happens. I just, we know the deal. Like even when Rodgers hadn't gone on the show yet, we knew the deal. Rodgers wasn't going to say anything groundbreaking. He was just going to tell us that Jordan Love was the starting quarterback, and that's what it is. So Love's going to be the starter. Rodgers is going to play for the Jets. It's just a matter of, will the Packers and Jets agree to some type of trade compensation? I think they will, and it'll be sometime, if not tomorrow, then it might spill into next week. But
yep, I agree. Agree. All right, Dawn, should I get into mine then?
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right, I got 3 superlatives. I might go through these kind of faster than usual just because we have been going for a while. And just, Jacob, thanks for hanging in here with us, man. We're past an hour and a half at this point, and you're still going strong. So appreciate that. All right, so my first one is, let's see here, best tweet. Now, I mean, this was like peak Packers Twitter week for sure, leading up to the anticipation of Rodgers, finally saying something, to then the spill out in the aftermath of that. But still, my favorite tweet this week was from Sandwich. It was just after Keyshawn Nixon re-signed, and of course, for me, re-sign versus resign, like without the the hyphen in there, it's a big sticking point for me. It's one of the things that really grates on me when people get that wrong, because it's confusing and you're like, wait, this person resigned, what happened? So kind of playing off of that, and then it was a picture of, well, like the base picture was Richard Nixon, kind of like a classic kind of Richard Nixon kind of thing, and then she had like really really expertly photoshopped in Keyshawn Nixon's head, like in the helmet on Richard Nixon's body. It was like one of those photoshops. It's like, this is well done, because I do a lot of really bad photoshops like all the time, and so to see one that's like that flawlessly executed with just really like a little concise joke, that also is like, yes, I'm so excited about Keyshawn Nixon re-signing with us, because I was worried about him, I think, more than anybody else in this offseason. So everything about that, it hit a lot of things at the same time. Awesome work, Sam. Best tweet of the week.
Nice.
My next one I want to talk about is best reaction podcast. So there were a lot of podcasts, a lot of reaction podcasts over the last couple of day and a half. I feel like I've listened to like 50 of these things now, but the one that I really enjoyed the most was Andy Herman went live with a Pack a Day Live kind of thing, and the cast of characters that he scared of for this thing was amazing. Mm-hmm. It was him and Justice Mosqueda from Acme Packing Company. He had Jacob Morley from the Gold Zone, of course, and among other things. And he had Dusty jumped on for a little while, and then Tom Grassi came in for the last half hour. I mean, this is like,
that was fun.
Just some of the people whose thoughts on the Packers and the work they do, I hold in the highest regard. So to have them all kind of like together and talking through this stuff,
yeah,
that was awesome.
That was great.
That was a good one.
It was great, even if you didn't catch the live, because I saw I was going live, and I was like, I can't put it live. I think I was going live or something. Yeah, Katie and I were, and so I replayed it today, and it was just as great. So you can still replay it.
I recommended. And I will say, and not just because you're here, Jacob, but people should also check out the episode of the Gold Zone from last night, because you guys did the moment justice and then some. So it was really good work.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was tough because Morley, Kawano, and myself all kind of fall on the side of we're tired of this dude to some degree. But I was really trying to remember that this is the greatest player I will ever see suit up for the Green Bay Packers. Mm-hmm. In all likelihood, that is the case. So I did not want to make it about his appearance on the show, what I thought of that. I wanted to make it about, it's been since, because I remember like when he stepped in the day, and like I told you guys, when they traded Favre, I was the naive fan saying, no, they're going to keep him. Like they'll never get rid of Brett Favre, like all that. And this is before Twitter and all the other stuff. So, and then when they traded him, I was like, okay, I'm all in on Aaron Rodgers. And that was one of the biggest pieces of evidence for a devolving society is the player fans that we have. It's like I hate using him as an example because I think he's incredible and surpassed every expectation. But like when somebody says, I'm a LeBron fan, like, no, I was raised when I was younger, like you root for the team. And once you pick that team, you stick with that team. And that's just how that is. Yeah. So my tradition, and I hope this continues to be a tradition, is Favre got traded. I bought a Rodgers jersey. Rodgers became a Hall of Famer. Rodgers hasn't gotten traded yet, but it's over. We know the deal. I bought my Jordan Love jersey on Tuesday. And so I hope, my one experience with this says Rodgers became a Hall of Famer. So, Jordan should become a Hall of Famer. I'm totally cool with that.
That's how that works. Absolutely how that works.
For sure.
All right. So I have one more then. This was best video. So JJ Leahy took a clip from The Office from when Andy is like saying goodbye. And, of course, Andy's kind of cheesy. He comes with a guitar, sings a song, but it ends up being this kind of like weirdly touching moment in the show.
Mhm.
And so he did that. And it wasn't just that. And it wasn't just like saying, like putting like Aaron Rodgers, written over Andy's face, whatever. He also then collaborated with Alexandra Basara, who, sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. I don't know where the accent is on the last name.
I love that dude.
Oh, he's amazing. Yes. I
That
know.
dude has allowed me to watch Family Night the last 2 or 3 years because he's playing Madden on YouTube, but you're allowed to sit there and watch that. Yeah. Boz is the man.
He is awesome. So yeah, collaborated with him. So Alexander got him like some clips to use in the video to interlace. And so, I went into this being like, oh, this will be like a, funny office meme kind of thing. Sit down and watch this for the next 2.5 minutes. And then like 30 seconds in, I'm like, why am I crying about this?
Aww.
Why is this hitting me like right in the feels? And I think it made me realize that, like you're saying, Jacob, lately you've been like just like ready for the Rodgers era to end. You're just kind of over the whole thing. I'm right there with you, man. But seeing that video, because it included like, clips from when Aaron Rodgers was drafted through like some of like the really highs, some of the really lows, and then ending with, Aaron Rodgers flashing the "I love you" sign to the crowd at Lambeau as he's walking off the field.
Oh man. Just one quick thing on that. I'm sorry. I don't mean to
No,
jump
go for
in,
it.
but Christmas Day last year, I was there when they're playing Cleveland. And remember, so at that point, that was after the first offseason where like everything had happened. Rodgers basically didn't want to be there. Like if you guys watched that first press conference he did when he came back, he almost sounds like a prisoner when he's talking. Like I'm here, but basically because I have no other choice. Well, then he throws that touchdown pass, the whole crowd, all eyes are on him, and he is going around the stadium just doing that thing in the middle of the game. And like I was like, that's some special stuff right there.
Yes.
Like even with everything that's happened, especially even with everything that's happened since April of this year, like that was incredible. That was fun to see.
Yeah. Yeah. So like seeing that all kind of together, clips from the beginning, the middle, the end of this era, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like this isn't just about this moment that we're like entrenched in of like this place we're at now. This is about this amazing player who did so much to bring so much excitement to us for so many years and all these amazing games. You can think back, like all the Packers fans will say like their most favorite Rodgers moment. And then, you hear the people say there's like, oh, that's one of my top favorites as well. And you get talking about it and just all of that coming from this one guy. Like, okay, we're sick of him right now, but you kind of step back and you look at the bigger picture. It's like,
for sure.
Woof.
Right.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's like JJ killed it with the video. Highly recommend checking it out. You'll laugh, you'll cry. It's better than Cats. So check that out.
It was very, very good. And just again, kind of a reminder of that things can be multi-dimensional. They're not just, love, hate. Like there's a lot to it. It doesn't, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I think one of the other ways that we've kind of devolved as a society when it comes to Twitter is there is no room for nuance between like he's the GOAT and he's trash. Like those are your two. Like so many people don't realize like, hey, this guy's just an average player and that's fine. Like it's totally okay that's all that he is. That's all that some players need to be. And those players have use. But it's always just one or the other. He's either the best ever or he's garbage. And that's I have so much and I have so much respect for anybody who plays in the National Football League because these guys are the modern day gladiators.
Yes.
Like I have so much respect for them. So I don't even like it. And I've said it myself, but I don't like when I say like, hey, that guy's trash or whatever. Cause it's like, well, yeah, compared to other NFL players or whatever, but otherwise that's it. Like he's one of the top 3%, 2% of people in the world at this craft that not anybody can do. Like there is no, if you work hard enough, you'll make it there. Like, I'm sorry, somebody's lying to you if they said that, because that's not, you cannot work hard enough and have my level of athleticism and play in the NFL. Doesn't exist.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Social media. I mean, I talked about this on my true crime show. I don't, even when there's somebody who's, blatantly guilty of doing really horrible crimes, you won't ever find me saying that person is a piece of crap, or that person is evil, or that person is this or that. That is not for us to say. That's just my feeling. So it really gets to me when, or even a team, oh, that team is trash. The nuances even between one team to another in the NFL, the margin is so narrow. So it isn't trash and greatness. There's just levels of greatness that we're looking at when we're looking at professional sports. So, well, Jacob, it's been fantastic. Do you have any final thoughts before we log off tonight?
No, I appreciate you guys having me. I guess I can just quickly share the direct message I sent you guys that kind of led to this. It wasn't me begging to come on the show, but just with the amount of negativity that exists in the world, I think that this is a really positive show. And I think the world in general could use some more positivity. So I very much appreciate this show. Not just because you say nice things about me. I think there's nice things to be said about anybody. So being able to find that optimism in the world, I think is a very positive thing. But otherwise, I think this has been fun. I appreciate it. It was, I enjoyed myself. So I apologize. I talk a lot, so it makes things go a little longer sometimes, but I had a lot of fun with it. And I am going to now publicly pressure you to make sure that you get back to Wisconsin for a game so we can all do this thing. So
yes,
for sure.
Yes, indeed.
I will.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Soon.
Well, Jacob, we appreciate you being so generous with your time. And, it's been just so fascinating to have the chance to sit down and talk and like let the conversation stretch out like it did. So like I had an absolute blast having you on the show. I really appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Like I said, I appreciate you guys having me. If you ever want to do it again, open book, man, I am. And that's just the best way to do things. So I appreciate being able to talk about some of the stuff I've been able to do, and hopefully it has inspired somebody to do something.
That's
excellent.
Great. Thank you, Jacob.
All right, Don, anything else from you before we move into the closing?
Let's bring her home, Maddie.
That's good. All right. So friends, make sure you are following Jacob Westendorf on Twitter. And of course, that's as it sounds, but I'll just spell it out for you real fast. JACOBWESTENDORF. And of course, you'll find links in our show description for everyone we mentioned. So please check it out. Whether you're a super fan or content creator, we'd love to have a chance to interview you. So if you're a subscriber, our DMs are open at Hey Willip on all the social platforms. We'd love to hear from you or someone you'd like to nominate to be a guest on our podcast this year. And folks, when you subscribe to our podcast, please subscribe to our podcast. When you do, you'll help us to keep spreading the love in our community. And the best way to help this podcast grow is by sharing it with your friends and family.
Yes, Maddie, that's right, because we love you. We're so glad to know you, to be fans of you, and have the luxury of being fans of the most storied team in the NFL. Mm-hmm. We appreciate your support, your subscriptions, and sharing our pod. And we look forward to seeing you again next week on
Hey, we like your pod.
Football in general comes down to discipline and people owning their roles. And when you aren't disciplined or you go outside the scheme, bad stuff happens.